Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of the Rising Laterally podcast. This is Arjun Sachdev.
And this is Jay Ballou. We hope you find something here that offers you new meaning or a fresh perspective.
If you do, we encourage you to give it life.
Be bold.
Experiment.
And most importantly, bring it into the interactions with the people you surround yourself with.
And see what happens.
Today's guest is Nir Bashan. Nir is a world-renowned creativity expert. He's taught thousands of leaders and individuals across the globe how to harness the power of creativity to improve profitability, increase sales, and ultimately create more meaning in their work. Nir has spent the last 2 decades working on a formula to codify creativity for business. That formula is found in his book, The Creator Mindset, which was released in August of last year and will be the focus of today's episode. Nir, so great to have you on the show. Thanks for being with us.
Hey, thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
Very good to have you. So creativity is a broad topic. It's a bit of a Rorschach test. When you hear it, people's minds naturally go in many different places. When I hear the word creativity, my first association is with like the creative geniuses in the world of modern music, because that's just what I'm into. I guess let's start with this. How do you define creativity, and who do you think that the creator mindset is for?
Yeah, brilliant. I'm curious. What kind of music do you listen to?
A lot of indie rock. Car Seat Headrest is like my favorite band of all time. Came upon them maybe 4 years or so now, and they're kind of my ideal.
Nice. What draws you to that type of sound?
I feel like the genre has just gone through so many different evolutions. Like there have been some big players that have really pushed it forward, and the textures are changing. Like there's definitely callbacks to 80s and 90s rock, but there's nothing like turning on a song that you hear for the first time on maybe like Spotify Discover Weekly and finding something different about it. It's like there's something unique about that texture, about that sound that is similar to something I've heard in the past, but is also pushing the genre forward in some way.
That's awesome. Yeah, I went to music school, so I'm particularly interested in that. But yeah, to answer your question, creativity, the way that I see it, is really about an ability to solve any problem, no matter what it is, in a new and different way. And my particular piece of creativity is applied to work, where I've seen a lot of people get stuck, Arjun and Jay. I've seen, people that are brilliant in every traditional way, right? They're really good at math, and they're so good at forecasting and looking at spreadsheets and, P&L sheets and making cash flow plans and all of this stuff. And then when it comes to being creative and in an ability to solve problems, it's just like it ends, man. It's just like it's nothing there. And I've noticed a pattern throughout our economy that there are these small but mighty companies, mid-size, even multinational, that have not implemented creativity in their problem solving in the day-to-day organization from the bottom to the top, and they suffer for it. And we suffer for it. We, the consumer, suffer because we don't have products that are continually innovative, products that can literally save lives, products that can change the experience of being human. And so I am on a lifelong mission to embed creativity into every organization, no matter what it is that they do, so that our lives can be a little bit better.
That's an awesome mission. Yeah, we've talked a lot in the podcast about the importance of recapturing that awe-stricken exploratory relationship we had with the world as children. And you hit on that in the book as well. Do you think part of the reason why organizations have lost the ability to think creatively is because adults in general lose the ability to think creatively over time?
No doubt. And thanks for reading the book. I really appreciate that, Jay and Arjun, man. I can't tell you guys enough. I get emails from all over the world, and even every single email I get's a big deal to me. It's not like I'm like, oh, whatever. Oh, look at me. I'm like, wow, somebody read my book. That's awesome.
No, we really enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate it. Yeah, we talk in the book about how when we're children, creativity is just part and parcel to who we are. I feel like it's in our bone marrow. It's in our DNA. I'll tell you this, my son, right, we buy him stuff on Amazon. There's an Amazon box at my house every day, right? At least one. And so, we get him a gift or whatever, something small. We're trying not to spoil him, but he's an only kid, right? So it's like hard.
Yeah.
We get a box, and like literally, so he opens the box, he takes the toy out of the box, places it, somewhere nearby, and then he played with the box for 2 hours. I promise you guys, like, I'm like, really? That's a cool transformer. It's like a car,
Yeah.
but a robot.
Right.
That's entertainment right there, right? And he's like, no, he's 4, right? So he's like, he puts the box on the side and like crawls in and makes it a castle, and then his imagination sees it as what it can be, not what it is. And here we are, like, dude, I'm supposed to be the creativity expert, right? And I'm looking at him, and I'm like, oh man, the recycle truck doesn't come till Thursday. I gotta pack the box, get all that crap out, put it in the recyclable, remember to take it to the curb and all of that stuff. And yet here he is having this wonderful experience. I don't know what the good hell happened to us, right? Why is it that we can't see things for what they can be, not what they are? And take that analogy of the box and put it in a VP of marketing's day to day. Put that in a CFO. I do a lot of work in financial sectors. I just did a virtual keynote for a big a mortgage group, and literally we were talking about finding that spark, that inner spark that we all had as kids, all of us, and applying some of that, like, wow, here is what the books look like, and here's where I want to get, and not looking at that problem analytically, but looking at it creatively and reawakening that sense of possibility that we all had as children. Absolutely critical in becoming creative.
Yeah, I would argue that we barely even give each other a chance to be ourselves anymore. We're constantly judging each other. We're constantly putting our own biases out there. And naturally, that's going to chip away at whoever is trying to be creative. And so now you take that kid and they go through school, they go through work, and they've been chipped away. Like literally, corporations will strip your soul away. That's what it feels like, because they want you to fit in a box. And so I think that people, they want to be creative, but they have a fear of being judged. They have a fear of being rejected, and they have a fear that their voice doesn't really matter.
Yeah, Arjun. I mean, there's no doubt that fear is a incredibly powerful element. I do some work here in Orlando with some different research groups and stuff like that. I live in what's called Medical City, which is kind of an innovation hub for new technologies, treatments, therapeutics. And I met a few people doing amazing work. Okay. You want to talk about fear, right? You want to talk about fear in medicine, right? Because if you make a mistake, right? What do? I do keynotes, I write books, I make mistakes all the time, but nobody dies. Nobody dies, right? But in medicine, you make a mistake. I mean, imagine how critical. And so generally, people in research and in the medical field are not, risk takers. They're not going to go off and take, different ideas to a place where something bad might happen. But I argue that is the very, very thing that we need. We need that initiative taken so that new ideas and fresh, different things can come out. And we talk about this in the book, but there's a researcher who worked on Dr. Ken Alexander. He worked on trying to cure a very specific type of childhood cancer. And this cancer is like so gnarly, man. I mean, it's the worst. Every single kid that gets it dies, every single one. There is a 0% chance of life after this diagnosis, which is, it's the worst thing on earth. Why children die is like the worst thing, the worst, right? And so, here he is trying to work on this, and he also has done a lot of work in on different infectious diseases. And he noticed one day when he was looking at a mosquito that carries Zika, he noticed that there were some similarities in the way that Zika spreads to the way that this cancer spread, right? And he thought about it for weeks, for weeks. And, he thought, if I take this Zika and maybe I can get a sample of this cancer and just see like what would happen. But that just is like a batshit crazy idea,
Yeah.
right? It is just so crazy, but incredibly necessary, right, for us to advance. Most people, when they have an idea like that, Arjun, they bury it, right? They're like, "That's a crazy idea. I just worked my whole life to get where I am. I'm the head of infectious disease at a hospital. I, did a residency and, all of this stuff. I went to 4 years of undergrad, 4 years of graduate school, 2 years of PhD school. I have loans that are astronomical, right? I've got a family. I've got to put food on the table. Would I go and take a risk like that on an idea, or should I just be conservative and chip away at things and that sort of thing?" And 99% of us, Arjun, are going to choose that conservative route. 99% of us. And that for me is simply unacceptable. We will
Agreed.
never get to where we need to go as a society. Yeah, dude, totally. We will never get to where we need to go as a society if we continue to let fear rule our decision-making process, because fear kills creativity right away. So what Dr. Alexander did was he brooded on it for a few weeks, and then he talked to a friend of his who is also a very esteemed researcher. And it was over wine or cocktails one night. I mean, just like we would do, we'd kind of like test the waters, dip the toe, but the stakes for him are 10 times higher than they are for me, right? I got an idea. It's coffee with Nir, right? I work with different corporations every morning from 8 to 8:15 for a week. I hang out with them. We help give them some creativity tips. Nobody dies if I screw it up,
Yeah.
okay? And like, I don't have to worry about, keep it quiet. And this is so crazy that, anyway, so he talked to a friend. The friend said, "You know what? This is really good." They talked to another friend of theirs, one of the premier cancer surgeons in the country. And she was like, what, like, we should try this. Let's try it. And honestly, guys, they kind of worked through it, and they're very, very guarded about it, because like, if somebody finds that out, they'll be like, "What are you guys doing? Like, what, who, why?" And the fear was crippling. And so what ended up happening was they just decided, you know what, this has some potential. And if this can save just one kid's life, we've done a amazing and worthwhile job. And so they took a culture, they put the Zika virus in it, and they all kind of stood around and watched. And a few days later, they noticed that Zika is killing this particular type of cancer. And they were like, "This is nuts. Let's write it up." And they wrote it up, and, fingers trembling before they hit the send button kind of thing for
Right.
peer review. They get some people literally going, "What are you guys doing? Like, what, why?" And here's the research, and here are the numbers, and here's the thing. You have to combine creativity with analytics, right? You can't just be creative all day. I mean, we all have that friend who lives in their basement. Yeah, dude, he's super creative, but he's like 45 and he needs to get a job, like get out of his parents' basement and like get on with life. So I'm not talking about getting rid of analytics. I'm talking about combining it. Just simply combining it with creativity can yield amazing results. So they did this thing. They're in phase 2 or 3. I can't really remember, but they're about to move to children to test in human. Can you guys imagine if that thing works? I mean, it'll be one of those amazing breakthroughs of medicine. It would be one of those things that would put 2020, 2021, the year of COVID and all this kind of bad stuff. It would be a beacon of hope, that I pray other scientists working on this stuff would go, "You know what? I've got a batshit crazy idea too, and I'm going to try it." That's what we need, you guys. That's what we need.
Yeah, it sounds like if you
absolutely.
follow the fear a little bit, that's how you overcome these feelings of stale situations.
And I think another big moral of that story, along with overcoming fears and overcoming conventional thinking, is the importance of being selective in the feedback that you solicit and the feedback that you pay attention to. And anyone who's gone out on a limb with a creative pursuit like that will know that not every piece of feedback is worth paying attention to. Not all feedback is helpful. Not all feedback is informed or even made in good faith. And sometimes you're going to encounter detractors, when you're going out there and trying something very creative. So one solution to this that you posit in the book is micro listening. Could you unpack that idea for our listeners?
Yeah, of course. So one of the creative principles that your listeners can do today is to start to micro listen. Opinions are like assholes, right? Everybody's got them and most of them stink. They wouldn't let me put that in the book. I wanted to so bad. Guys, that chapter started with that sentence. And my editor, God bless her, she was like, absolutely not, Nir. Absolutely. No, delete. But that's basically what it is. And micro listening is the ability to solicit advice from a very small and trusted group. What that ends up doing is it sparks creativity because that small and selected group is small and selected for a reason, right? You trust this person, you like their judgment, they're funny, they have a good sense of humor, they're easy to approach, they're empathetic, whatever qualities it is that you have in your small network. And this could be different for any sort of idea that you want to bounce off of each other. Like it might be, that you, Jay, and Arjun are really good for, business type ideas that I might have. And I want to bounce that off you because you're super trustworthy and honest. Or it might be, a couple other friends or whatever. But micro listening is really all about choosing a very small group of people and disseminating a piece of information or unpacking a plan and just hearing the feedback and really listening. We spend a lot of our time kind of talking, and this is rare for me usually when I consult or do workshops. I start kind of a conversation piece and then put it out to the audience, and I want people to get excited and engaged. This is creativity that comes from them, not from me. I'm not going to help you solve creative problems. You are going to solve creative problems. I can awaken that spirit within you, but I can't make you solve them. So what ends up happening when you do some micro listening and work in a small group is the feedback that you get can be very valuable, and that feedback can be enough to get you to the next rung and to get you to the next level. So if your listeners want to try something now today that would help them become more creative, try getting those ideas out into the world. Most people, when they have an idea, they write it down or they keep it in their head, which is the worst thing to do. Got to write it down. But they keep it in their head and they guard it like it's a precious treasure, right? They're like, I've got an idea. And they like pet it and they love it. They give it little kisses. And they're like, no, this is the best idea. It's going to revolution. I can't tell anybody. They're going to steal it, and all this stuff, right? And that's like the worst thing you can do when you have new ideas and new ways to solve problems. At work, what you want to do is you want to write stuff down. And I talk in the book about a process of concept, idea, and execution. And it's a way of generating and building creativity in everything that you do. And it really is about putting pen to paper and allowing your mind to kind of separate from the idea a little bit so that you don't fall in love with it. You get into a rhythm of creating ideas on a day-to-day basis and that sort of thing. But once you do that, please share it with somebody, share it with a trusted group, and do a little micro listening and see what the value is of that particular idea.
Yeah, I mean, throughout your book, I feel like it was one of those things where you realize you have to take action to be creative. And so you just mentioned micro listening. And so, people can actually focus on being creative on a small scale as well, right? Think about just the small tweaks that you can make to have a better client interaction or, a better teammate interaction or even a better interaction with yourself. So you can just be creative on a small scale first, build that momentum, get that strengthened in your mind. And then now you may start to have bigger, more creative ideas as a result of going through those iterations.
No doubt. Most people, Arjun, think, oh, if I'm going to be creative, I got to be like Steve Jobs. I got to invent an iPhone. Mm-hmm. It's like, no, you don't. I mean, you could be creative at your next meeting. You could be creative with your next client. You could do just a little bit more listening. You can do a little bit more empathy and maybe just understanding that, courage and humor are really important elements of a transaction between two people. Creativity isn't necessarily scaling the mountain, right? Creativity can be just putting one foot in front of the other and learning to see the world as it can be, not as it is.
So can I
Yep.
give you an example of something I've done in my past? I mean, in 2016, we started interacting with our clients virtually. So we were still using WebEx.
Nice.
And now everyone knows the importance of having, a background that may be engaging, but a lot of people put a lot of stuff about them, whether it's a Peloton or whether it's like their awards that they won. What I did was I just stole an idea from ESPN's Woody Page. I don't know if you know there's a show called Around the Horn, and there's a guest on there, Woody Page, and every day he's got like a little quote, like that's a funny thing, but it captures your attention. When I realized that I was going to be interacting with financial advisors virtually every single day, I literally ordered a chalkboard. It arrived at work. It was like 4 feet tall, and it would just sit in the camera. And I wrote a stat of the week related to asset management,
That's
because
cool.
I knew that you had to bring value to the conversation, and there's going to be points where you may be stuck, or you may not know what to say, or you may not have the right question. All of a sudden, there's a chalkboard behind you with a stat of the week. That's naturally going to get the other person who's watching you engaged. And all of a sudden, there's this element of a brand being built. So for the next 4 years, from 2016 to 2020, any client that I had a meeting with, they expected the chalkboard as well. So that's a simple idea that if you're a consultant, whether it's in financial services or whether it's in tech sales, do something that creates that engagement, and it's not about you.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. And those are the little types of creative things that separate you from the other people doing that same thing. And the more that you could think of these ideas and the more that you have them, the more you leverage your advantage in the marketplace. You cannot talk enough about how important creativity is in separating you from your competition, right? People say to me all the time, Nir, I'm in the pizza business. We do the same thing that my competitor does. I'm like, no, you don't. You don't do the same thing. There's a reason your brand is your brand. You got to sort of find out why it is that you've gotten so stale and reinvigorate the process that makes you who you are. It really is about looking within and understanding who you are as a person, as a person in your career, or who you are as a company and what your values are. And getting it really out into the world in a way that consumers can digest. When they're able to digest that type of message, they gravitate towards you. It's a quote a week. Wow, that's a really good quote. We love that guy, right? It's kind of a cool interaction, or whatever it is that you sow through the fabric of your business. Make sure that thread is always created.
One of the things that I've been seeing headlines for recently is the return to office work. A lot of people have been working from home the last 12 months, but vaccines are rolling out, I think, quicker than expected. And people may be returning to the office, sometime by the end of the year or even earlier. You talk about the importance of in-person interaction in the book as a way of promoting creative collaboration. Once it's safe for people to do so, Nir, do you think returning to the office will create a better environment for creative collaboration?
It's a really good question. I think that we will never go back to the way it was before. I think that in-person meetings and in-person abilities to connect to a client or to a coworker is paramount. I did a keynote for a very famous top three. What are they? Like a consultancy. They're like one of the top consultancies, and we had a question in with the virtual keynote, and the young lady said, I miss Wednesdays. And I said, well, what's on Wednesdays, right? And she was like, well, Wednesday was the day that we all went, all the gals in the office got together and we did our happy hour, right? And we left at 4:30. We changed it up every time we went somewhere else. It was really fun. And I miss those days. I literally went to work so that I could have those Wednesdays, because that's when I got to really connect. And little issues got worked out, or, somebody bought a laptop and maybe went through a list of 2 or 3 things, that got caught that day. And I haven't done that now in a year, and I'm dying. What do you recommend? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, am I going to solve like everybody's work from home problem by like delivering some really great creative tidbit? No, again, creativity comes from within. It is up to somebody to solve that problem in a way that makes sense to them. And I told her, what would you do if you could get back together? And she was like, well, number one, like the drinking part's great, right? We'd have a glass of wine, everybody'd have fun. I said, okay, what else? She's like, well, the solving the problem part is great. I'm like, why don't you move that virtually? She's like, it'll never work. I said, what, why would it never work? And she's like, it's just, you lose that kind of fun of showing up at a place and interacting with the staff and, just that fun of doing it. I said, try it. And I got an email from this woman, or she reached out on LinkedIn, and, this was a couple months ago. She's like, yeah, we moved it online. It's really fun. It's not as good and it's not what it used to be, but man, it still kind of works, right? Because now I get to see where people live. I never knew my coworkers had kids, right? Some of my coworkers, the gals, whatever. Oh, all of a sudden we're like, there's kids running in the background, and it made people really relatable because I was able to see a slice of their home life that I never saw before. And so to answer your question, Jay, I think things are going to change and they're going to be a little bit different. But when things change and when they are different, there's really kind of amazing value there, right? When we're too used to getting comfortable and expecting the same thing over and over again. We have a lot of businesses around the world that are built up just for that. A McDonald's is a placeless place, right? A McDonald's in Shanghai looks exactly like a McDonald's in Redmond, Washington, right? I don't know, hotel, right? A Hyatt Place looks exactly the same in Dallas than it does in, Maine somewhere. It's just one of those things that people love, that predictability and that sense of, repeat experience. And that's okay. But sometimes we have to understand that, an in-person happy hour or something like that is going to change. And in that change, there is value there. There is great sort of insight that you would have never have had before in this particular case. So do I think that things have changed? Yes. Do I think that face-to-face value has gone away because of virtual meetings? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I think that maybe going into an office every day is going to change. But I think there's clients that are going to want to sit down face to face with somebody before they sign over a check for 10 million, 100 million, $2,000, whatever business that you're in, people are going to want to do that. And I think when it's safe to do it, and we're starting to see some things open up right now, or April 7th, 2021 at the time of this recording. And so I'm seeing very, very positive signs of things opening up. I got my shot. I know a lot of people that have, and things will start to get back to it. But will it be exactly as it was before? Absolutely not. It'll be just something new and a little bit different. And that little bit different will be something that we have never anticipated before.
Yeah, that idea of something being a little bit different also reminds me of one of the concepts in your book about how mistakes can actually move creative success forward. There have been a lot of situations where serendipity has blessed creators out there with a mistake that they identified as a progression forward, and they actually were able to harness it productively. Could you tell us a little bit about that concept and maybe an example of someone that was able to identify a mistake as a creative advancement?
Definitely. So mistakes are literally the seedlings of good and innovative things, but we treat mistakes in our culture and in our businesses as the worst thing ever, right? Something happened, we're like, oh no, we didn't expect this. This is the worst thing ever. Quickly clean up so that we can get, somewhere else. But the truth is that companies and careers that are focused on learning from mistakes and understanding mistakes and then reaping their full benefit are often some of the most creative people on earth. And that's what we need to start to work on. I've worked with a couple of Google companies that were like literally failure labs, and they changed the paradigm to, hey, we're going to try something, and if it doesn't work, let's celebrate it. They get a cake and that kind of thing, and they have changed the mentality of failure from one of, oh no, this sucks, we made a mistake, to one of, hey, that was inevitable, and it was that product or service that we were working on showing that it ran out of road, right? It just kind of showed that it's not a viable solution. So I think that idea is really, really good. I know that there is throughout history many, many companies that have started or, had a new product or some kind of growth be a catalyst of a mistake that has occurred. Toll House Cookies is a great example. That was a bed and breakfast called the Toll House. And I think it was outside of Boston. And it was a woman owned business in, I think, 1920, which was unbelievable, back then. And so the woman who was running the bed and breakfast ran out of ingredients, and she fancied herself as, a really great chef and a cook and a baker and all this stuff. And she ran out of ingredients and substituted one thing for another while making cookies. And what she ended up substituting was, chocolate that was cut up into little chips. And she invented the world's first chocolate chip cookie. And,
Wow.
it was a mistake. And it was an amazing mistake, right? Like incredible. Scotchgard was also started as a mistake. Somebody poured something on their shoe while they were working at 3M, and it ended up it was raining or something. They stepped in a mud pile, and they noticed the mud just like rolling off their shoe. One shoe was filthy, right, soaked down like a soaker, right, socks, the whole deal soaked, and then the other shoe is like kind of like everything's fine. And so the scientist went back to work, and she discovered that basically the Scotchgard thing is an amazing benefit when it's coated on fabric. There, 3M in particular has had a lot of these things, right? When they were working on Post-its, they were actually working on a super glue that was supposed to bond to the atomic level, right? It was better than welding, right? We're going to make a glue better than welding, right? That was the initiative. And what do you do when you have those initiatives? You get a bunch of analytical people together, engineers and stuff like that. And you're like, solve this problem. Like, let's make, a glue that's stronger than welding. And then you have a bunch of analytical output, right? You have, okay, let's look at the atomic level of how two pieces of metal combine and that weld material, and then the flash point and all of this stuff. And nobody's really thinking outside the box, right? You have a bunch of people aiming towards the same goal, but that same goal does not have the impetus of any outside idea, any spark of creativity, any spark of anything but people looking at math and charts and figures and trying to, hey, how do we get this thing done?
And stirring the same data around. You're stirring the same data.
It's amazing. And it sustains entire teams, and it sustains entire budgets. It's amazing. Like literally, what are we doing? We're working on it. Well, how are we working on it? We're working on it. What do you mean how? It's like, okay, why are we getting a bunch of engineers together to try to solve a glue? Why don't we get a musician involved? Why don't we get somebody who thinks differently than an engineer? I don't know, maybe a HR person. And why don't we get, engineers are the low-hanging fruit when you have a problem like that. But businesses that think a little bit differently and look at things a bit differently are the ones that are going to reap the rewards of this next 100 years, right? It's not going to be the engineers that are really, really good at bonding metal. It's going to be the company that puts together a bunch of these people.
So have you noticed companies that you're working with, are they doing things to reward creativity? Are they giving their employees awards for creativity? Because most companies are giving awards for being the top at sales or something like that.
Yes. So the companies that I work with are starting to see the value, but that is a drop in the bucket of the ocean, compared to other companies out there. Most companies today are rewarding analytics and efficiencies and stuff like that. But what they don't understand is that one day those analytics and those efficiencies will flatline. There is no doubt in my mind that this is what will happen. No doubt. History has proven me right. If you look at every single company out there in the entire world, they all have a sort of a incline period, and then they have a flatline period, right? And then most companies, once they hit that flatline period, then descend into insolvency or go out of business, right? It is the companies like Tesla that, they put out the Roadster and then they flatline, and whoa, Model 3, we're going back up, and then flatline, and then whoa, all this, connected technology, and we're going back up. It's those types of companies that are doing it right, but they are few and far between, right? There is not a sort of universal approach to this. This is just, a handpicked sort of story. Every single company out there will flatline if you're not rewarding creativity. I work a lot with companies after somebody from the consultancies has been there, the big three. And what the big three do is they go through and they're kind of augmented staff, which is a whole different thing, right? They're augmented staff and they stick around for years doing God knows what, but they stick around, and what ends up happening is there is still a flat line somewhere because they have maximized efficiencies at some portion of the pipeline. Then the improvement is very small and it can justify a paycheck, but every single time it flattens out. And so what I'm asking when I come in is, guys, we've already done the analytic. You've beaten the analytics to death. Like, let's start looking at problems creatively. Why are we trying to get that particular machine in that particular country, in that particular manufacturing process to output 0.002% better, right? Faster times and stuff like that. You guys have already done that. They're like, yeah, we got it to 0.001. Now we need it to 0.002. I'm like, let's shift our mindset. Let's start to look at this creatively, right? Why are we focusing on this when we should be focusing on that? And what I try to help people do, and again, creativity comes from others. It doesn't come from me telling you what I think you should do. It comes from me awakening a solution that's within you. What I do with people who think like that is I say, okay, let's start to look and up the conversation to some of the bigger issues and look at the real reason that we're trying to get these efficiencies. And 9 out of 10 times it is, we need better sales. Or if we can make more products, then we can sell more products. Stuff like that type of logic. Near over a half year, that efficiency will enable us to make this much more money. And I say, okay, is that an efficiency that is worth this type of effort? Or would you like to maybe make triple or quadruple that? And people say, yeah. Whoa, why? What do you got in mind? And I say, that's where we need to focus. That's where we need to spend the money. We need to look at other items, auxiliary services. What about the way
Customer
that,
service.
we're interacting with our customers, whether we're a B2B or B2C? What about looking at, different sort of auxiliary things that are in the realm or in the footprint of this particular efficiency that we're trying to do? People have spent a lifetime and a career of, hey, look, I proved myself. Look at what I got. It says here I got this efficiency, and we ran the report, and look, here's proof that I'm doing great. Well, sometimes proof of doing great in a particular sector is really not helping the overall company achieve its goal. Sometimes those particular improvements are really stagnations in disguise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the last few anecdotes have reminded me a lot about the importance of first principles thinking. And you actually mentioned Tesla a few beats back. Elon Musk is very famously known for being a huge proponent of first principles thinking, which is basically the idea of instead of starting with peer consensus or conventional wisdom, that's going to get you that like incremental progress. Boil a process down to the fundamental parts that we know to be true and then build up from there, which requires, I think, very creative thinking. So an example of that may be in a sales process. If I'm looking at my year right now and I'm under quota, and my management has been suggesting that I get 60% of my sales from my mid-market segment this year and 40% of my sales from my enterprise accounts. And I'm doing the math, and I figure out that 20 times the amount of time goes into my mid-market sales for that incremental dollar that goes into my enterprise sales. Maybe I need to go back to first principles and say, if the goal here is just selling our product and bringing dollars in the door, maybe I don't need to hold myself to that tight ratio. Maybe I should suspend my mid-market activity and go whole hog on enterprise sales, because that kind of seems like the logical thing to do when you boil everything down to the fundamental parts, which for a lot of people, requires internally breaking the mold in their own head and solving the problem with no mental restrictions on their freedom of thought.
Boiling it down to its roots is an incredibly difficult thing to do. It sounds easy, but it's incredibly difficult. When you boil things down to its sort of base elements, its foundation, you're using creativity to get there. And the cool thing is, Jay, the way that you do it, or the way that I do it, or the way that Elon Musk does it is totally different. Why? It is because it boils down to who we are as people, right? It taps into our DNA. It taps into our background, our history. Were we born here? Were we born abroad? How were we raised? Were we raised, with a silver spoon? Were we struggling paycheck to paycheck? All of that stuff makes up the DNA of who you are as a human being. And the way that you boil down those fundamentals as a salesperson, looking at, should I spend time with the enterprise or the mid-market, will be your specific creative footprint. And that is incredibly important.
Absolutely, because it's like people would rather spend 10,000 hours, because that's like the world famous way to do things, instead of thinking about it in 10,000 iterations. And I think that's a huge difference in terms of like, don't just sit there and go through the motions. Actually think about ways to be more refined and get more ROI out of each action, where your next action is more efficient than your previous one. And the two from that is going to be more efficient than the one I just took today. So like, it's about iterations, not just hours spent.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I mean, look at you guys, right? You guys have a very successful podcast, well esteemed, all over the world. You guys get, thousands or 10 to hundreds of thousands of listens, per episode. This didn't start yesterday, right? You guys weren't like, oh, you were going to do a podcast, hit record. Oh, look at these millions of, listeners and all these people, right? This is an iterative process.
And if it wasn't for creativity, Nir, you would probably agree with this. We would never have survived as a species. When your back is against the wall, you have to be creative. It's the reason we're all here.
Definitely. Yeah. I feel like, I talk in a book about Harriet, the world's first creative person. And, she's one of the things where if you write a book, right, I learned this early in the process. When you write a book for one of the major publishers, you can't just put what you think in there. I love this, right? You can't just say, well, I think, something. If you don't have two sources to back it up and all of the stuff, they delete it. And so that was the one thing that they let me keep in the book that I don't really have attributed, because, we couldn't find any records to back up Harriet, the cave woman, which is kind of funny, right? But so basically, I feel that one night, 60, 70,000 years ago, Harriet was being attacked by a beast, and this beast was far larger and more powerful than us in every which way. But, she saw a stick that was nothing but a walking stick, and she saw like a little berry picker that was nothing but a berry picker. And she put the two things together. She put the berry picker on the end of the stick and was able to fight this beast off. And that creativity that took to put those two things together is literally the reason why we're having this podcast today, right? We're sitting on a machine thousands of miles apart, having an awesome conversation so that we can share our knowledge with people and they can get really excited and use this stuff in their day-to-day lives. All goes back to Harriet 65,000 years ago, enabling our species to become creative so that we can all survive and get where we need to go. And today, sadly, that creativity has been devalued by the very people that need to champion it the most. People in business, people in enterprise, entrepreneurs, people working on the betterment of society, no matter what it is that your company is doing. We need that type of thinking today in order to elevate the conversation to the next level. and evolve our species to the next realm.
Absolutely. Yeah, one thing Harriet didn't have that we have today is all the ample technology and devices that surround us all the time. I'm fortunate that we have them, but as we all know, we can grow attachments to them. When is the last time that you've been able to manage a tech detox, Nir?
So I talk in a book about tech detox, and it's wonderful. It's really about shutting off your phone. I try to do it every Friday night to Saturday night, um, because I think it's really important. I don't do it as often as I could. I'm like the dentist with bad teeth, right? So I have events or clients or friends or something like that, and it's distracting. But I try to do it every week, and I notice that when I'm able to stick to it, when I'm able to get off the phone and off the computer, really, really good things happen. What about you guys? Have you had any luck? It seems so. I've done some more research about it because I'm writing an article, and it seems that it's like crack. These devices release some kind of dopamine in our brains that trigger a sort of an addiction that is biological, and I'm still wrapping my mind around some of those things. But what about you guys? Are you able to put it down for a while?
Well, consider this. I would say that when I do put it down, uh, usually my best ideas are coming in because I'm not distracted. I'm wondering why at 2 a.m. now, that's like why I'm getting my best ideas is because at 2 a.m. I'm like completely off technology. It's been a couple of hours and my brain is finally able to come to me with some ideas. I wonder if there's anything to do with that.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think there is. I broke my computer screen earlier in the year, and for like 6 days, I was going without a computer, and at first it was really jarring just because computers pretty much where you get all your productive work done. I spent more time that week like writing, spent more of the week reading physical books, spent more time that week talking on the phone with people, seeing my family. So, I don't know. I think it's something that we're all going to be working through our whole lives because you do need technology in a lot of what we do to be productive, but it also has a highly consumptive function as well. So it's easy to get lost in the time sucks.
Yeah, and I get lost in it too. I mean, and I'm supposed to be sort of aware, hyper aware of these things, and it's just one of those things that is incredibly powerful. You
Let
mentioned
me ask.
reading. I think reading is so important. I don't think enough people read these days, and the amount of really good books out there, especially in the business sector right now, are unbelievable. Unbelievable. The amount of knowledge that people are putting a lifetime of knowledge on 290 pages. And the publishers are selling them for $19. It's like there's no reason why you and your listeners should not read at least a book a week. I go through between, I don't know, 4 to 6 books a month. I read so much, and I'm so inspired and incredibly happy with what people are writing down, and just to get a peek into somebody's mind for $19, right? Their entire life's work. And these aren't like just anybody's, right? If you're going to publish a book and you're going to be at one of the big publishers, you've been thoroughly vetted. I mean, they get 1 million submissions a year, and they publish roughly 60, each of them, each of the big five. 60 books, guys, out of 1 million. So it's been curated, right? What you're getting out there, self-publishing is great. I love it. There's some gems out there, but I'm talking about like looking at what Hachette's releasing, or McGraw-Hill. If I didn't say that, they'd be a pet. But like, one of those Harper, right? Look at what those business books are, and just grab a couple every month. Just grab a couple and go through it. What you're reading there is far, far more worthwhile than the $20 investment you made.
Yeah, and as you read more, you feel like you feel empowered to share the information that you have. Like we don't live in each other's heads, and if we don't share each other's perspectives, then we run the risk of not making the right decisions or running into the risk of just having disagreements because we just don't know what we're thinking. And so I just think that as you read more, it empowers you to actually share more. Nir, I have kind of an interesting question around like creativity and just what's going on in today's modern society, a lot of creatives are microdosing. What are your thoughts on psychedelics and what that does to creativity? If it's necessary, if that's just like a placebo for some people, like, hey, if I take this, then I'll actually be more creative. I mean, what are your thoughts on psychedelics and how that might link to ego drop, which might lead to actually more creativity?
Yeah, strongly against it. I'm strongly against anything that takes creativity out of being a process. Creativity is not about, waking up one day and taking a shower and then doing 5 push-ups and going, okay, I'm ready to be inspired. Inspire me, world. Creativity is about a process that you can repeat and maintain every single day of your life so that you have reawakened that creativity, that latent creativity that you had as a child. Every man and woman on earth was born creative. And it really is about rediscovering that, not through microdosing or not through whatever the latest and greatest craze and trend is. It's about discipline. It's about sitting down and doing it and making creativity happen and, approaching it in a repeatable and sustainable way.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you what your closing message would be for those who believe that creativity is not for them. I think that's a pretty strong note to end on. One last question, though, we've been asking all our guests, Nir, that we wanted to ask you as well, is what in your mind is a modern masterpiece?
I think a modern masterpiece is the triumph of creativity and analytics into solving a pressing and urgent problem. That's what I think. And, the stuff that, with the Zika virus and the cancer is a perfect example of what I think is the modern masterpiece. It's analytics and creativity, the human mind, the two hemispheres coming together to advance our condition so that humanity will become more evolved, more safe, more healthy, more empathetic, and ultimately to make a better world for us all.
Wonderful. We will certainly be putting your website and your LinkedIn, if you'd like, in our show notes. The book is The Creator Mindset. Really highly recommend our listeners check it out. It will certainly light a spark in you. Nir, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks, Nir.
If you enjoyed this episode, you can sign up for the Rising Weekly newsletter sent out each week.
Every Friday, we expand on the episode with insights, recommendations, and more.
You can sign up at risinglatterly.com.
Thank you.